How have things been? What have you been up to recently?
What have I been up to? Um, just working on school at this moment, trying to get it done. Uh, Also trying to get ready for after school. Um, so I'm looking at auditioning for orchestras when those positions come up, or just getting to know as many people as I can to maybe work with them on their music
Yeah,
and play with them. Yeah, but I think for right now, just because my school stuff is so pressing, I've just been really focusing on getting my chops up on the instrument, and also um, I'm writing all of my music for my composition recital, and I'm writing it all from scratch, and it's like 45 minutes of notated music that I have to finish writing and get rehearsed and performed. So
what's the
that's what I'm doing.
instrumentation for that?
I'm writing a couple of pieces. The first is a set of etudes for bass that I would be performing. And I'm just kind of trying to think of techniques that I want to work on for myself and trying to write musical pieces that encourage me to be musical about it while also working on the technique. The way that it's structured at USC is your first 2 years you're in like a seminar type of class with your instructor, and then you also go into private um, lessons. But the older, or I guess the longer you're around, and like once you become a junior and senior and above, you only get lessons. And so the past couple of years, I've been working with my private instructors and just kind of meticulously going over all of my pieces. And they ask me questions like, why did you do that? And if I don't have an answer, then I usually means I have to scrap it and come up with something else.
Yeah.
But this year I've been working with Vince Mendoza and Christopher Trapani, and they're very demanding in that respect. They're not really interested in the techniques if it doesn't serve the music, and that's been helpful for me because I feel like where I lack in my writing is the bigger picture stuff. I think I'm more interested in the textures that I'm trying to achieve, but I get lost in it, and they're kind of encouraging me, or I'm being encouraged to think about the bigger things, which is what anybody else is listening to anyway. I just kind of get narrow. I get too narrow.
So, a couple
Yeah.
things about that. One, Vince Mendoza, he gave this talk through Berkeley like a year ago. It was
Uh huh.
during, yeah, so it was during COVID. He was talking a lot about that because it was for the jazz composition department. And he was just like, yeah, I really don't care about like the technical side if the bigger picture part of it isn't there. And he was
Yeah.
talking about all his favorite musicians, and he said it's really important to have like a good list of influences. People don't like to generalize themselves, but if someone asks you like, "Oh, who are your favorite musicians?" or "Where is your inspiration coming from?" like you can give an answer. It's not just like, "Oh, like I just pulled it out of a hat and like I just have all these tricks like and I put them together and make music."
Yeah, my first lesson with him, he asked what I wanted to work on, and I said form, and then he kind of just laughed and went, "Okay." And then,
That's
because
funny.
I think both of us kind of knew that that's in the end that's kind of like the most important thing. Like if
Yeah.
you try building a building on toothpicks, it's not going to work, no matter how pretty it looks. Um, the structure is the most important part of whatever you're doing. Yeah, musical architecture is kind of something that I've been thinking about. And then that's also something that I've been thinking about a lot in my improvisation recently. I'm still trying to figure out what that means for myself. Um, and
Yeah.
trying to steer away from just like the general like, oh, start soft, get loud, and then end it.
Yeah.
Um,
But also
I'm
not just
trying,
starting loud and ending soft for the culture or just to like do something
yeah,
different.
or yeah, just doing coming in and just having an idea, or trying to create a structure, whatever it is, and have it seamlessly dovetail into other things.
going off of that, for this class, for my podcasting class, we were actually talking last week about purpose and intent. And we all went around the class and we were sharing what our podcasts were going to be about. And we had to answer, like, specifically who our audience is going to be and, like, what the purpose of it is. And even if it wasn't exactly what we were thinking, we still just had to, like, have an answer. And, as musicians and as improvisers, sometimes it's out of our wheelhouse. I just wasn't really thinking about the whole intent thing for a bit because you're working on your techniques and you're working on all the tiny minutia of composition and music. That's the real shed. What do you do outside the music to, fill your days?
I've been kind of not great about doing things outside of music this past couple months, but I would say when I do have the time, I really enjoy rock climbing.
Nice.
And most people are okay with just doing it in the gym, but I like being outside and I like being in nature and just I like the whole experience. And it also keeps me fit and strong and
Yeah.
good for bass. But then on the other side of that, I also have been really enjoying cooking. I kind of got into that during the pandemic for the first time. I didn't grow up cooking. Neither of my parents really cook. I was a really picky eater, but I just got into it, and it just kind of opened my eyes to everything. How important food is to culture and community and self-expression. Like, food can be so expressive. And I actually kind of developed this emotional relationship to food. Kind of similar to what it is and how I feel about music. Like, sometimes I'll eat something and it'll be so amazing that I get, like, emotional about it.
Yeah.
And I think having something that is that also kind of outside of what I focus on all of the time, to have that kind of emotional satisfaction, I guess, from something outside of music I think it complements it very well, and I'm able to appreciate how music might affect other people in the way that food affects me. Because I think I'm so deep into music that I don't really I don't know what it's like to listen to music without knowing anything about music.
Yeah.
But I do know what it's like to enjoy food without really knowing anything about food. And I
Yeah.
hear people telling me about their experiences listening to music, and I don't relate because it's like, oh, well, I'm just thinking about the texture when I'm listening to music, or, oh, that snare sounds really good, or, oh, how do I get the bass sound on that? And then meanwhile, the person next to me is like, this makes me feel like this. And that's all we're trying to do in the end.
But with music now, and especially like with music that's electronic or like made on laptops, there's a lot of, the whole like plug-in world, and there's so much talk about how you make your music sound better. But with food, it's just like there isn't really any way around it. Like, better ingredients just equal better food. It's not like you can put some like plug-in on your food to make it taste better, or I don't know.
MSG.
Yeah, literally. The drip
MSG is
plugin.
OTT of music.
Yeah, just
Yeah, drip. That's funny you mention that, because talking about plugins, I'm trying to use as little plugins as possible.
Yep.
And I've been talking to my friend Johnny, who's an amazing producer, about this. And he went from using, like, on a vocal chain, using, like, 15 plugins or something like that to, like, 3. And it's just learning how to use the plugins. Kind of like how to unlock the full potential of an ingredient, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, you could use a tomato. Someone could use the best tomato in the world and make it, like, taste really bad.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
somebody who knows how to use the tomato, cooks it well, just the right amount, seasons it just the right amount, the context in which they're using the tomato is appropriate.
I was listening to your recent album, Amba Beat, and
Yeah.
I think it's very sick.
Oh,
A lot of
thanks for
awesome
listening.
sounds. I love the feature with Henry Solomon.
Yeah.
Went crazy on it. Very cool album cover too. Colorful.
Thank you. Yeah. I got really into colored pencil drawing for about a month.
So that's your drawing.
Yeah.
That's so sick.
But I was super into it. I bought colored pencils and I like did it every day for like a month. And then I was done. But I'd like to go back to it. But that's something that I did during that time.
How did you know you wanted to do that? Was it like a compilation type thing, or were you like, I'm gonna make an album?
It took a long time for me to feel ready to put it out just because it did feel so compilation-y and collage-y. But I think I'm growing more comfortable with that in that I feel like I don't have a specific genre or musical interest that I feel comfortable committing to because I just feel like if I do that, then I would just miss everything else.
Yeah.
And that's been something that's been kind of on my mind a lot as far as thinking about how I want to represent myself as a musician. Because I love writing avant-garde classical music, but I also love writing like tunes for my friends to play.
Yeah.
But I also like making crazy electronic music or just crazy sounding. And then I also like um, like indie folk music, and I've been thinking about like we're living in a time I think now where it doesn't matter and you can just make the music you want to make, and if it's good and if it holds water, people will listen to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in the age of Google and YouTube, where you can get anything you want and multiple versions of it for free. Like, might as well be able
We're
to
living,
make whatever you want
yeah.
and put it out
And
there.
also just no one has the patience to, I mean, I feel that a lot of people don't have the patience anymore to sit down and listen to an album that's all the same. And so maybe
Yeah.
just kind of exploring that and making art that's relevant as far as that goes. Making art that's like sporadic in a cultivated way. It can't be random. Like
Hmm.
it still has to be artistic, but yeah. So I was working on that a couple years ago, and I was gonna take the winter to make a beat or something every day, but I ended up getting a little too obsessed with each one of them,
Yeah.
and it just took a long time. And then I put them away for a while. I was like, okay, I got to work on some other stuff and see what happens. Felt, it was significant to me that a year passed and I was still into the music that I made. So I thought, oh, I'll just release it.
I feel like in the future, there's going to be a lot more musicians who are doing this type of thing. Like, I would definitely say that I'm doing that right now. And
Yeah.
since, you know, we were at Colburn and stuff, like, I always felt like that. And there are people coming up to me saying, look, kid, like, you can't do more than one thing. Like, you're not going to get good at any of these things. And I just instinctually knew, like, that was just wrong. There's multiple things I want to express different ways, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I was told that a lot as a kid too. And maybe you can relate to this, but I felt that like I started having to hide parts of myself around different people, and I'm still trying to grapple with that. Like with my classical friends, I never talked about jazz or pop or anything, and then when I was with my jazz friends, I never talked about all my classical stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, you just kind of feel stretched out and awkward. I just feel like it kind of resulted in me being a really awkward person. I would love to see less of the you can't do that and more of the, oh, you're interested in that? That would be cool for you to pursue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, kids in middle school, I mean, elementary school, high school, like, they should be inspired to do that, not like being put in a box. One thing that I've been really curious to ask other musicians about is their experience with COVID, because it's changed a lot about just music being released. And like you were saying, people have just like shorter attention spans now, and there's way, way more stuff being put out onto the internet, and the whole nature of live shows has completely changed. But I was just wondering, like,
Yeah.
what it's been like, gigging and collaborating and how that's changed.
It was really tough for me because I felt like right before the pandemic, I was gaining a lot of momentum as far as playing and meeting people and getting opportunities. But when it hit, it was just kind of arresting to me, and I felt like I kind of regressed. And I lived alone at the beginning of the pandemic for like half a year, just alone in my apartment.
Yeah, that's a long
And
time.
it was pretty intense. I didn't play a lot of music. I didn't do a lot of music. I just kind of did nothing. It was not a fun time, but I think it was a necessary time. I feel like I got to learn about myself, um, which was enlightening and good. But as far as the music goes, it took me about a year before I could get back into wanting to be back in shape. Not even just being back in shape, but just having the desire to play again and want to make music and not feel like I need to drop out of school and
Yeah.
do something else. But then also at the same time, I became really interested in music that wasn't academic. And I actually like became pretty anti-school over it because I realized I was able to improve and learn and find my passion about music over Zoom the same as I was in person. And I realized all I really needed was my lessons and my friends who taught me a lot. Like I was not a very good producer or a producer at all. Like I wasn't really interested in it. It was cool, but it didn't really make me excited. And then when I was forced to make music on my computer,
Yeah.
um, it just kind of blew open a world of music that I had not even been exposed to really. And it's just so freeing, and it made me so excited to write music again. And I got into like singing, and which I never would have thought I would get into. It allowed me to stop being so jaded about quote unquote people who didn't quote unquote know about music, quote unquote, and didn't know anything about music.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, like these there's people in their bedrooms making music and they don't know anything about music as far as like what to call anything. But they're making like the coolest music ever.
Yeah.
And what am I doing? I'm learning about Beethoven again.
Hmm.
And I'm sick of it. Like I don't want to listen to that stuff anymore. I want to hear new stuff. There was obviously still something missing, and then once I started playing live again, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Like I realized, wow, I really needed to be in front of people and play music. And it I just feel like I had a lot of epiphany moments, and it re-centered myself as far as why I'm making music. Oh, why do we make music? Well, music isn't just it is a personal journey, and it is a journey of self-discipline and craft and expression, but it's also equally, if not more so, a communal thing and something that's supposed to be shared among other musicians and among listeners. I'm working on it, and the ego is very powerful, but to just kind of separate your ego from it and have it be a real spiritual thing and a communal thing, as well as a discipline thing.
I was wondering if you have any new projects that you're working on, or like if yeah, what's going on with you?
What I'm mostly just working on my written music at the moment. I'm not doing a lot of stuff on the computer. I would like to, but I think just the time is calling for me to put the pencil and paper to work. But hopefully, I would love to get the pieces played well and played more than once and submit them to be recognized maybe. Also, in addition to the bass piece, I'm working on this string quartet, which is kind of like what's taking up most of my musical attention right now. And I love like spooky things, and I love video games like Dark Souls and Demon Souls, and uh, I'm horrible at them, but I love the story, the like never-ending circular formal aspect of the games where you can just play them forever and everything is connected. And I love also, I'm hesitant to use the word content, but the content of the story being so referential to like medieval folklore of like Middle Europe
Yeah.
with like ghosts and beasts and tainted blood and pagan ritual and sacrifice. And for some reason, I've always been interested in that since I was a kid. My mom was always worried about me. But not too recently, I had a crazy dream about like being in one of those situations, and it was terrifying. It was a nightmare, and I was alone in this forest, and I came upon like this pagan village that was going to go out into the forest and hunt these mutated beasts, and they were going to sacrifice them. And it got me thinking about, oh, like I want to write a piece about this. So I'm writing this piece about this nightmare, and it's called, and I want it to be complete. I don't want it to be so obvious what it is. So it's called Impressions of an Occult Nightmare. And it kind of tells a third person story of what it is and my experience in this nightmare. Anybody who discovers Ligeti, I think, becomes obsessed with Ligeti for at least a little bit of time. But I'm like cringely in my Ligeti phase right now. I'm obsessed with him and Bartok. I love the music and I love the harmonies and I love the sonorities, but mostly about like the ideology and the folkloric references and the of the earth kind of music. And I think that's what draws me to a lot of folkloric traditions and improvisational traditions, because it just feels so natural
Yeah.
and less cultivated. And I've been kind of straying away from the traditional Western aesthetic. It does still sound like a string quartet, you know. I sketched out the form with timestamps and I drew graphics, and I've never done that before. But I was very inspired by Augusta Reed Thomas, who's a wonderful composer, and she's a composition professor at the University of Chicago. But she came in and gave a presentation at the composition department at USC, and she was very generous and very transparent about how she writes music. And she was showing us all of these sketches for her pieces, and they were like works of visual art, just graphically. The way she color coded everything, the form and the density of texture and timbre and color was all pre-mapped before she even wrote a note. And it got me thinking, and it is helping me out a lot, and I can't recommend it enough. Even if it doesn't have to be pretty. Like, I'm not a great artist, but as long as you know what it means, and that way you can always reference it if you ever forget where you are, if you're in the middle of something, especially something this big. I've never written anything this big. It's helping me, and I'm also realizing we talk about it in music kind of, and we talk about sketching, but there's no like formal training process. At least in my experience, there has never been a formal training process as far as how you go about sketching something. And all of the composers that I know all have their own way of doing it. But then when I talk to visual artists, especially oil painters, they're like, oh yeah, well, like I have my underpainting, and then I have my color blocking, and then I have then this, and then I do this, and then I do this. And it's like everybody's pretty much consistently doing the same thing. Then I'm just curious. I don't have an answer for this. Why isn't someone sitting young kids down and being like, all right, before you write any notes, like, what is the structure of your thing going to be? And because music is so momentary, and only recently is it like referential. You can revisit it over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
That's a recent thing. But in all of like, what, 10,000 years of music's existence, at least, like only in the last 100 years have we been able to preserve it. And even then, it's still like a linear thing as far as time. Maybe visual artists are more concerned about the form and structure, because someone can just stare at it for as long as they want.
Yeah. That's a good point.
I don't know. If you know how to read, you can read a script, or a book or a novel. But the music notation is so niche, and it only makes sense to musicians. And even then, it's so like non-specific that it's so up
Yeah.
for interpretation all of the time. I'm told in my lessons like, oh, you need to be more specific with your articulation, and then I go into orchestra and everybody has a different idea of what a single articulation means. Like it's non-specific, and that's the beauty of it, and it happens differently every time.
I know you've been working with Henry Solomon and Logan Kane and like Nicole McCabe
Hmm.
and like the Minaret Records kind of family. How has
Yeah.
that been?
It's really cool how everybody has their own thing, and I feel like everybody's going and doing it. Like even Yusef, who runs the label, it's his thing and it's his project, and he's going and doing it. And Logan is working on his music and he's doing it. And Nicole and Henry and Thumpasaurus also, they're not really Minaret, but they're like kind of in the same vein where they're all just like going and doing their thing. And it's impressive and it's great, but something that I do wish about the LA scene specifically, and something that I see in New York and Boston and other places, is that nobody really even like, no one really like tries to do anything together. And I wish that there was like a more of like a community thing, more bands, more collectives, something, or having it less individualistic. And maybe that's like the LA syndrome where everybody comes out here and has to do their own project. Because the world of bands and collectives is gone. It's just artists now. I feel personally it's very hard to collaborate with anybody because they're busy working on their own stuff. And then so I'm over here busy working on my own stuff. you know?
Yeah.
When the help is there, it's, oh, I can help you work on your stuff.
Hmm.
But I don't feel like it's very often like, oh, let's work on this thing together and like make something together.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely gotten a lot worse with COVID because everyone was like, "Oh, I'm gonna work on myself now." Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, maybe we should try to bring that back. That's a really good point.
Yeah. I love all of those people's music, and I'm very inspired by them. Like Logan and Henry, they're a couple years older than me, and when I was growing up, I would hear their music, and it was very inspirational and like inspired me to, wow, like what, how are they doing that? I got to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
Feels like we're all on our own out here.
Mm.
That's been my personal experience, and maybe I need to be less of an introvert and go out more. But
No, I mean, you're focused on your Dark Souls quartet. You gotta finish it, and
yeah, exactly.
and then in a couple of months you'll start the collective.
The Dark
Dark.
Souls Collective.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, thank you so much for doing this. This was awesome. Have a good rest of your day, and
You too?
talk to you later.
Yeah, sounds good.
Peace.
See you soon. Peace.